The text message arrived at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. Just wanted to give you a heads up, I'm bringing Marcus to dinner this year. It's time everyone met him. No emoji. No question mark. Just a period that landed like a hammer on glass. I read it twice in the blue glow of my phone while my wife slept beside me, her breathing steady and unaware. Marcus. The name I'd heard whispered in phone calls she took in the garage. The name that appeared on her calendar as lunch meetings that stretched past 3 hours. The name my sister caught on a restaurant receipt folded in Jennifer's coat pocket last month when she borrowed it in the rain. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I'm Daniel Pearson, 42 years old, and until that text message, I thought I'd built something solid. Jennifer and I had been married for 17 years. We had a modest home in Riverside with a mortgage that hurt but didn't break us. I taught history at the local high school, grading papers at the kitchen table while she worked late at the marketing firm downtown. On weekends, we split yard work and pretended the silence between us was comfortable instead of what it actually was, which was distance we'd stopped trying to close. My younger sister Rachel lived 2 blocks over with her husband and twin boys. My parents, both retired, hosted every major holiday in the same dining room where I'd grown up. Thanksgiving was sacred in our family. My mother would start planning the menu in October, my father would argue about football games, and Rachel would bring pies that never quite set but we ate anyway because that was the deal. We showed up. We stayed. We belonged to each other in the loud, messy way families do. Jennifer knew this. She'd been part of it for nearly 2 decades. She knew my mother set the table the night before, folding napkins into swans she learned from a library book in 1987. She knew my father carved the turkey with the same knife his father used, hands shaking now but still insistent. She knew Rachel's boys would fight over the wishbone and someone would spill gravy and we'd all laugh too loud at jokes that weren't funny because that's what you do when you love people. And now she wanted to bring Marcus. The man she'd been seeing while I corrected essays about the Civil War and assumed our own Cold War at home was just a phase every marriage cycled through. I didn't wake her. I didn't throw the phone. I got out of bed, walked to the kitchen, and stood at the window overlooking our backyard where the sprinkler system I'd installed last summer had one head that still sprayed crooked. I'd been meaning to fix it. Always meaning to fix things and never quite getting there. The next morning, I showed the text to Rachel over coffee at the diner near her kids' elementary school. She dropped the boys off and had 30 minutes before her shift at the dental office where she managed appointments and kept everyone's chaos organized. She read the message 3 times, her jaw tightening with each pass. Marcus, she said flatly. The lunch guy. I nodded. She set my phone down carefully, the way you set down something that might explode if jostled. Does she think we're stupid, or does she just not care? I stirred my coffee even though I hadn't added anything to it. Both, probably. Rachel's face went through a series of expressions I recognized from childhood. Shock, anger, then that particular brand of older sister protectiveness that had gotten her suspended twice in high school for fighting kids who messed with me. What are you going to do? She asked. I don't know yet, I admitted. But I know I'm not sitting at that table watching her parade him around like this is normal. Rachel leaned back and crossed her arms. Mom's going to lose her mind. Dad will probably have a stroke. Do you want me to tell them, or do you want to? Neither, I said. I want to handle this without turning Thanksgiving into a war zone. She raised an eyebrow. Daniel, it's already a war zone. She just threw the grenade. You're deciding whether to duck or throw it back. The waitress refilled our cups without asking, and I watched the steam rise while I thought about all the things I should have said months ago when Jennifer started coming home smelling like cologne I didn't own. When she stopped asking about my day. When intimacy became something we scheduled and then canceled. I'd told myself it was work stress. Midlife drift. The normal erosion that happens when you stop paying attention. I'd been wrong, and my silence had given her permission to rewrite the story we were supposed to be living. I need to talk to Mom and Dad, I said finally. Before she does. Rachel nodded. I'll come with you. We paid and walked out into a November morning that had all the warmth of a refrigerator. The sky was low and gray, the kind of weather that makes you believe winter has opinions about your choices. I drove to my parents' house with Rachel following in her minivan, and the whole way there I rehearsed sentences that all sounded worse out loud than they did in my head. My parents were in the living room when we arrived, my mother sorting through her recipe box, my father watching a morning show with the volume too high because he refused to admit he needed hearing aids. They looked up when we walked in, and my mother's smile faltered immediately. Something's wrong, she said, not a question. I sat on the couch where I'd sat 1,000 times before, where I'd told them I made the varsity basketball team, where I'd announced I was proposing to Jennifer, where I'd cried when my college roommate died in a car accident. The couch had held a lot of my life, and now it was about to hold this. Jennifer's having an affair, I said, because there was no good way to soften it. She's been seeing someone from work. His name is Marcus. And she wants to bring him to Thanksgiving dinner. The room went silent except for the television, where a chef was explaining how to baste a turkey. My father picked up the remote and turned it off. My mother's hands, still holding a recipe card for green bean casserole, started to shake. How long? My father asked, his voice low and controlled in a way that meant he was furious. I don't know exactly, I said. A few months, maybe longer. Rachel sat beside me and added, I saw a receipt in her coat last month. They went to Antonelli's. The Italian place with the candles and the waiters who sing. My mother set down the recipe card and pressed her palms together like she was praying or trying to keep herself from flying apart. She wants to bring him here. To our table. I nodded. She texted me last night. Said it's time everyone met him. My father stood and walked to the window, his back to us, shoulders tight. Over my dead body, he said quietly. This is our home. Our family. She doesn't get to disrespect that. Mom looked at me with eyes that had seen me through scraped knees and bad breakups and the year I thought I'd never find a job after college. What do you want to do, sweetheart? She asked. I thought about it. I thought about the humiliation of sitting there while Jennifer introduced her boyfriend to my family like we were all supposed to smile and pass the stuffing. I thought about my nephews asking questions no one should have to answer. I thought about the years of holidays that would come after this one, and how this moment would poison all of them if I let it. I want to cancel Thanksgiving, I said. The words felt enormous and small at the same time. Rachel's head snapped toward me. Cancel it? Just don't have it, I clarified. Tell Jennifer the dinner's off. Don't give her the chance to make a spectacle out of our family. My mother looked stricken. We've never canceled Thanksgiving. Not once in 40 years. I know, I said. But if we go through with it, she wins. She gets to control the narrative. She gets to act like this is acceptable. And I'm not giving her that. My father turned from the window. What if we just uninvite her? My mother shook her head. That will cause a scene. She'll show up anyway, and then what? We call the police? This is our son's wife. Was our son's wife, Rachel corrected. She stopped being family when she started sleeping with Marcus. The conversation spiraled from there. My mother wanted to confront Jennifer directly. My father wanted to ban her from the house permanently. Rachel suggested we have Thanksgiving anyway and just leave before Jennifer arrived, turning her grand entrance into an empty room. That idea landed differently than the others. It had a kind of poetic justice to it. Let her walk in with Marcus, expecting an audience, and find nothing but dirty dishes in the sink and a note that said we'd already eaten. It was petty, maybe, but it also felt like the only move that didn't require me to either explode or disappear. What if we do that? I said slowly. What if we have Thanksgiving early? Say 11 in the morning instead of 3. We eat, we clean up, and we're gone before she gets here. My parents exchanged a look, the kind of silent conversation people have after decades of marriage. "It's ridiculous," my mother said. "But so is bringing her boyfriend to Thanksgiving," Rachel added. My father sat back down heavily, the chair creaking under him. "If we do this," he said, "we do it together. No one stays behind to explain. No one opens the door. We're a united front." I felt something unclench in my chest. "Agreed," I said. We spent the next hour planning it like a heist. My mother would cook everything the day before and reheat it Thursday morning. Rachel would bring the boys early and keep them entertained so they didn't ask too many questions. My father would park his truck at the end of the driveway to block Jennifer's usual spot, a small petty detail that made him smile for the first time all morning. I would text Jennifer the day before to confirm dinner was still at 3, giving her no reason to suspect anything. And at 1:30, we'd all leave. Lock the doors. Turn off the lights. Disappear. It felt insane and necessary, the kind of plan you make when every other option leads to a version of yourself you don't want to become. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. When I got home that afternoon, Jennifer was in the kitchen making a salad, her phone propped on the counter playing a podcast about productivity. She looked up and smiled, the same smile she'd been giving me for years, and I realized I didn't know when it had stopped reaching her eyes. "How's your day?" she asked. "Fine," I said. "Yours?" "Busy. Got a new client. Big campaign launch in December." She tossed the salad with more focus than it required, and I wondered if she was thinking about Marcus. If she texted him when I was at work. If they laughed about me. The quiet husband who graded papers and didn't ask questions. I almost said something then. Almost asked her if she understood what she was about to do. But I didn't. Because men like me, we're taught to keep things smooth. To avoid confrontation. To hope problems solve themselves if you just ignore them long enough. That night, I drafted a response to her text and deleted it 4 times before settling on something neutral. "Sounds good. See you Thursday." 3 words that gave away nothing. She didn't reply, and I told myself that was answer enough. The next 2 weeks moved like a play where everyone knew their lines but no one wanted to say them out loud. Jennifer talked about work and Marcus without connecting the dots, as if they existed in separate universes. She mentioned he might get promoted. That he was funny. That he'd helped her with a presentation that went really well. I listened and nodded and felt like I was watching someone rehearse a script I wasn't part of anymore. At school, I taught the American Revolution and the causes of the Civil War, and every lecture felt like a metaphor I didn't want to unpack. When sides can't reconcile their differences, I told my students, sometimes the only option is separation. A kid in the back row asked if that meant divorce was like the South seceding, and the class laughed. I didn't. Rachel checked in daily. "You holding up?" she'd text, and I'd reply with a thumbs up emoji that lied for me. My mother called twice to confirm details, her voice tight with an anxiety she was trying to package as excitement. "Your father keeps practicing his speech," she said. "What speech?" I asked. "The one he's going to leave on a note for Jennifer." I told him no speeches, but you know how he is. I smiled despite myself. "What's it say?" "Something about respect and consequences." "He's on draft 7. Tell him to keep it simple," I said. "We're not trying to win an argument. We're just trying to be gone." The day before Thanksgiving, I confirmed with Jennifer via text, keeping my tone casual. "Still good for 3 tomorrow?" She replied immediately. "Yes. Can't wait for everyone to meet Marcus. He's really excited." I stared at that message for a long time. The exclamation point. The enthusiasm. The complete lack of awareness or shame. It was like watching someone walk toward a cliff and refuse to look down. That night, I packed an overnight bag. Rachel had offered her guest room, and I'd accepted. I wasn't planning to come home after Thanksgiving, not until I figured out what home even meant anymore. I moved through the house touching things I'd touched 1,000 times. The banister I'd refinished one summer. The bookshelf I'd built in the garage. The picture frames holding photos of a marriage that looked real in 2 dimensions but had gone flat somewhere along the way. Jennifer was upstairs on a work call, her voice bright and animated in a way it never was with me anymore. I could hear her laughing, and I wondered if it was Marcus on the other end. I didn't go up to check. Instead, I left my bag in the trunk of my car and came back inside to sleep one more night in a bed that had become as unfamiliar as everything else. Thanksgiving morning started. Dark and cold, the kind of November day that makes you want to stay under blankets and pretend the world isn't waiting. I got up at 6, showered, dressed in jeans and the flannel shirt my father had given me last Christmas, and left the house before Jennifer woke up. I texted her from the driveway. Heading to my parents early to help with setup. See you at 3. She sent back a heart emoji, and I wondered if she ever thought about what that symbol was supposed to mean. My parents' house was already alive with activity when I arrived. My mother had been cooking since dawn, the kitchen thick with the smell of turkey and sage and butter. Rachel was setting the table with her boys, who were arguing about whether the Pilgrims had mashed potatoes. My father stood at the counter carving a ham he'd baked the night before, his hands steadier than I'd seen them in months. "This feels wrong," my mother said quietly when I walked in. "Like we're sneaking around in our own lives." "We are," I said. "But it's the only way that doesn't end with someone saying something they can't take back." She nodded and handed me a stack of plates to carry to the dining room. The table looked like it always did. White tablecloth. Cloth napkins folded into swans. The good china we only used twice a year. Candles that hadn't been lit yet. It looked like tradition, like continuity, like all the Thanksgivings that had come before. Except this time, we were eating at 11 in the morning and leaving before the guest of honor arrived. Rachel caught my eye across the table and mouthed, "This is insane." I mouthed back, "I know." But we kept moving. Kept setting forks and filling water glasses and pretending this was just another holiday. My nephews, bless them, were too young to sense the undercurrent. They ran around the house playing a game they'd invented involving a stuffed turkey and a lot of sound effects. Their noise was a relief, a reminder that life kept happening even when the adults were falling apart. At 10:30, my father opened a bottle of wine and poured glasses for everyone except the kids. "To family," he said, raising his glass. "The people who stay." We clinked and drank, and I felt the weight of what we were about to do settle over the room like a fog. My mother brought out the turkey, golden and perfect, and set it in the center of the table. My father carved while Rachel and I shuttled dishes from the kitchen. Mashed potatoes. Gravy. Stuffing. Green beans with almonds. Cranberry sauce from the can because that's how we'd always done it. Rolls that were still warm. Pie waiting on the counter. It was a feast, the kind you see in magazines, and it was happening 4 hours early so we could avoid the woman who'd been part of this family for 17 years. We sat. We said grace. My father's voice cracked on the word grateful, and my mother reached over to squeeze his hand. Then we ate. It should have been awkward, but it wasn't. It was sad and defiant and strangely normal all at once. We passed dishes and complimented the food and told stories about past Thanksgivings. "Remember when Daniel dropped the pie," Rachel said, "and the dog ate half of it before anyone noticed? Remember when it snowed and we couldn't get out of the driveway for 2 days," my mother added. We played Monopoly until we all hated each other. The boys wanted to know if we were going to play Monopoly today, and Rachel said maybe later, which was a lie we all understood. I looked around the table at the people I'd known my entire life and felt a gratitude so sharp it hurt. These were my people. The ones who showed up. The ones who left early on Thanksgiving morning because loyalty mattered more than convenience. By 12:30, we'd finished eating. By 1, the dishes were washed and the leftovers packed into containers my mother insisted I take. The house was clean, the candles blown out, the tablecloth folded and put away. My father wrote a note and left it on the counter. Jennifer, Thanksgiving has been moved. We've already eaten. Please do not come inside. There are leftovers in the fridge if you'd like some. Otherwise, we'll be in touch. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't kind. It was factual, which felt appropriate. We turned off the lights. Locked the doors. My father moved his truck to block the driveway. And at 1:15, we all got in our cars and left. I followed Rachel to her house, my parents behind me, a caravan of people who'd just done something that felt both ridiculous and right. In Rachel's living room, we sat in silence for a few minutes, the boys already distracted by cartoons. Then my phone buzzed. It was Jennifer. Where are you? Dinner's at 3, right? I didn't answer. 10 minutes later, another text. I'm here. Why is the house dark? Then, 5 minutes after that. Are you seriously not here? Is this a joke? I handed the phone to Rachel, who read the messages and snorted. She still doesn't get it. My father looked at me. You going to answer her? Not yet, I said. Let her sit with it. Another text came through. This is childish, Daniel. We need to talk. And then, an hour later, I can't believe you did this. You've embarrassed me in front of Marcus. I read that one out loud, and my mother made a noise somewhere between a laugh and a gasp. She's upset we embarrassed her, Rachel said. The irony is almost beautiful. My father stood and stretched. I'm going to make coffee. Anyone want pie? We ate pie in Rachel's kitchen while my phone continued to buzz with messages that grew angrier and more desperate. By 4 o'clock, Jennifer had called 6 times and sent 15 texts, none of which I answered. Finally, at 5, a different message came through. Fine. You want to do this the hard way? We'll do it the hard way. I showed it to Rachel. What does that mean? She shrugged. I guess we'll find out. That evening, my parents went home to their dark house and found it exactly as we'd left it. The note was gone. The leftovers were gone. Jennifer had been there, taken what she wanted, and left. My father texted me a picture of the counter. She didn't even close the fridge all the way. The milk's warm. It was a small thing, a petty detail, but it felt like a summary of everything. Carelessness disguised as confidence. The assumption that someone else would always clean up the mess. I stayed at Rachel's that night, sleeping on a pull-out couch that smelled like the fabric softener she used on everything. I could hear her and her husband talking in low voices in their bedroom, probably about me, probably about what came next. I stared at the ceiling and tried to figure out if I felt victorious or just tired. Mostly, I felt like I'd drawn a line I couldn't uncross, which was terrifying and freeing in equal measure. The next morning, I woke to 17 missed calls from Jennifer and a voicemail that was 2 minutes of her voice cracking and angry and confused. You can't just ignore me, she said. We're married. You owe me a conversation. I listened to it twice, and both times I thought the same thing. I didn't owe her anything anymore. Not after she decided Marcus was worth more than 17 years. Not after she tried to humiliate me in front of my family. Not after she texted exclamation points about a man who wasn't me. I called my lawyer instead. His name was Greg Martinez, and he'd handled my parents' wills a few years back. He was calm and competent and didn't waste time with pleasantries. You want a divorce, he said, not a question. Yes, I said. And I want it done quickly. He asked about assets, about kids we didn't have, about the house and the cars and the bank accounts. He asked if there was infidelity, and I said yes. He asked if I had proof, and I said I could get it. Good, he said. Virginia is a fault state. That matters. We scheduled a meeting for Monday, and when I hung up, I felt like I'd started a process I couldn't stop. Which was exactly what I wanted. Jennifer showed up at Rachel's house on Saturday. I watched from the window as she got out of her car and walked to the front door, her face a mask of determination. Rachel opened the door but didn't invite her in. "Where's Daniel?" Jennifer demanded. "Not here," Rachel said. "You need to leave." "I came to talk to my husband." "He doesn't want to talk to you," Rachel replied, her voice steady. "You made your choices, Jennifer. Now deal with the consequences." Jennifer's face flushed. "You don't get to decide that." "Actually," Rachel said, "I don't. But Daniel does. And he's decided you're not welcome here." She started to argue, but Rachel shut the door. Not slammed it, just closed it firmly, the way you close a book you're done reading. Jennifer stood on the porch for a full minute before getting back in her car and driving away. "I owe you," I told Rachel. She waved it off. "That's what family does." On Monday, I met with Greg and signed papers that started the process of ending my marriage. He walked me through timelines and expectations and the reality that this would take months, not weeks. Jennifer would have to be served. There would be negotiations. Possibly mediation. Possibly court. It sounded exhausting, but it also sounded like progress. "Do you want to try counseling first?" Greg asked, a formality. "No," I said. "There's nothing left to counsel." He nodded like he'd heard that before. When I left his office, I felt lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because I'd done something. Heavier because I knew what was coming. That night, Jennifer texted again. "I know you're angry. I get it. But we need to talk face to face. Please." I stared at the message and thought about all the times I'd wanted her to say please. To ask instead of assume. To see me instead of looking past me. Now it was too late for please. Now it was lawyers and paperwork and dividing up a life we'd built together but hadn't maintained. I typed one sentence. "My lawyer will be in touch." Then I blocked her number. It felt brutal and necessary, like setting a broken bone. It hurt, but it was the only way to heal. The weeks that followed were strange and quiet. I stayed at Rachel's, then moved into a small apartment near the school where I taught. It had bad carpet and a kitchen the size of a closet, but it was mine. I bought a futon and a coffee maker and a lamp from a thrift store, and slowly, the space started to feel less like exile and more like beginning. My students noticed I was different. Quieter, maybe. More patient. One kid asked if I was okay, and I told him I was figuring it out. He nodded like that made sense. At 17, everything is about figuring it out. At 42, you realize you never stop. Jennifer contested the divorce. Her lawyer sent letters claiming I'd abandoned her, that I'd manufactured a crisis, that she deserved half of everything including the house and my pension. Greg responded with copies of text messages, with witness statements from Rachel, with a timeline that made it clear who'd broken what. It was ugly and procedural and exactly what divorce is when both sides hire people to fight for them. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt like I was watching the end of something in slow motion, every frame painful and necessary. My parents invited me to dinner every Sunday, and I went because I needed the routine. We didn't talk about Jennifer unless I brought her up, which I rarely did. Instead, we talked about the weather and the news and whether the Redskins would ever win another game. Normal things. Safe things. The kind of conversations that hold you together when everything else is falling apart. Rachel's boys started calling me Uncle Dan the fun one, which made me laugh because I wasn't particularly fun. I just showed up and played whatever game they invented and didn't check my phone every 5 minutes. Kids notice that. They notice when adults are actually present. One afternoon, the younger twin asked me why Aunt Jennifer didn't come over anymore. Rachel started to redirect him, but I stopped her. "Sometimes people grow apart," I said. "It doesn't mean anyone's bad. It just means things change." He thought about that and then asked if I was sad. "Yeah," I said. "But I'm okay." He handed me a toy truck and said trucks made everything better. I wished that were true. Thanksgiving came around again the following year, and this time there was no drama. No surprise guests. No early dinners. Just my family around the same table, eating the same food, telling the same stories. Jennifer wasn't mentioned. Marcus wasn't mentioned. It was as if that whole chapter had been a fever dream we'd all agreed to forget. But I hadn't forgotten. I'd learned that silence isn't the same as peace. That avoiding conflict doesn't prevent it, just delays it. That sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is draw a line and mean it. The divorce was finalized in March. I signed the papers in Greg's office and walked out into a spring afternoon that felt brand new. I didn't celebrate. I didn't call anyone. I just drove to the park near my apartment and sat on a bench and watched people live their lives. A couple walked by holding hands. A kid flew a kite that kept crashing. An old man fed pigeons from a paper bag. Life, I realized, didn't stop because mine had changed. It just kept moving, and I could either move with it or get left behind. I chose to move. I started running in the mornings, something I hadn't done since college. I joined a book club at the library where nobody knew me or my story. I took a weekend trip to the mountains and hiked trails that left me sore and satisfied. I wasn't trying to reinvent myself. I was just trying to remember who I'd been before I'd spent so many years being someone's husband. Jennifer reached out once after the divorce was final. A long email about regret and mistakes and how she hoped we could be friends someday. I read it, felt nothing, and deleted it. Some bridges aren't worth rebuilding. Some doors close for good reason. I didn't wish her harm. I didn't wish her anything. She'd made her choices, and I'd made mine, and now we were just two people who used to know each other. That summer, I ran into Marcus at a coffee shop downtown. He was with a woman who wasn't Jennifer, laughing too loud at something on his phone. He didn't see me, and I didn't approach him. There was nothing to say. He'd been a symptom, not the disease. The real problem had been two people who'd stopped trying and didn't know how to start again. I ordered my coffee and left, and the encounter meant so little I forgot about it by the time I got home. My father asked me once if I thought I'd ever get married again. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe. If I meet someone who makes me want to. He nodded. Just don't settle, he said. Settling is what kills things. I promised I wouldn't. And I meant it. Because I'd learned the hard way that it's better to be alone and honest than together and pretending. That love without respect is just performance. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from something that looks fine but feels wrong. The second Thanksgiving after the divorce, I hosted dinner at my new apartment. It was cramped and chaotic. My mother worried the turkey wouldn't fit in my tiny oven, and Rachel's boys spilled cranberry sauce on the carpet. But it was ours. Our noise. Our mess. Our family, smaller and stronger for everything we'd survived. We didn't talk about the Thanksgiving we'd left early. We didn't need to. It was part of our history now, a story we'd tell someday when enough time had passed to make it funny instead of painful. For now, it was just something we'd done. Something we'd survived. And as I looked around my crowded apartment at the people I loved most, I realized that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The spring after the divorce brought changes I hadn't anticipated. My apartment, which had felt temporary for months, started to accumulate signs of permanence. A better couch replaced the futon. Actual curtains went up instead of the bedsheet I'd been using. I bought plants from the hardware store, succulents that supposedly couldn't die, and managed to keep most of them alive. Small victories counted for something. At school, I noticed students lingering after class to talk about things that had nothing to do with history. College applications. Family problems. The general anxiety of being 17 and expected to have everything figured out. I listened more than I advised, having learned that sometimes people just need someone to hear them without trying to fix anything. One girl, Amanda, came in during lunch period and asked how you know when it's time to let something go. I thought about Jennifer. About the years I'd spent hoping things would improve on their own. About the relief that came only after I'd finally made a decision instead of waiting for one to be made for me. You know when staying hurts more than leaving, I told her. She nodded slowly, chewing her pen cap, then thanked me and left. I never found out what she was really asking about, but I hope she figured it out sooner than I had. Rachel's boys turned 7 that spring, and their birthday party was held at a trampoline park that smelled like feet and sugar. I showed up with wrapped presents and watched kids bounce off padded walls with the kind of abandon that only exists before self-consciousness sets in. Rachel pulled me aside near the concession stand where everything cost twice what it should. You seem different, she said, sipping a watered-down soda. Better different or worse different, I asked. Just different, she replied. Lighter, maybe. Like you're not carrying something you don't want. I considered that while a mob of 7-year-olds screamed past us chasing tickets from a game they'd already forgotten how to play. Maybe I'm just getting used to the weight, I said. She bumped my shoulder with hers. Or maybe you finally put some of it down. Her husband called her over to help with the cake, and I stood there thinking about weight and what we carry and why we convince ourselves we have to. My mother started setting me up with women she knew from church or the book club she'd joined after retirement. All very nice, she'd say, handing me phone numbers on scraps of paper torn from shopping lists. Divorced, widowed, never married but open to it. I went on exactly 3 of these dates, each one polite and awkward and conclusive in its evidence that I wasn't ready. The first woman talked exclusively about her ex-husband's failings, which felt like watching someone else's divorce on repeat. The second spent the entire dinner checking her phone and apologizing for checking her phone, a loop of distraction I recognized from my own marriage. The third was actually pleasant until she asked if I wanted kids, and I realized I'd never seriously considered the question because Jennifer had always said not yet, and I'd assumed eventually that would change. I don't think so, I told her honestly. She nodded, thanked me for dinner, and that was that. I reported back to my mother that while I appreciated her efforts, I'd handle my own social life going forward. She looked disappointed but agreed, then immediately asked if I'd met anyone at school. Mom, I said. I teach high school. She laughed. I meant other teachers, Daniel. I hadn't met anyone at school. Most of the staff was married or significantly older or significantly younger, and the few who weren't already knew my story because schools are small ecosystems where everyone's business becomes common knowledge. I was fine with that. I wasn't looking for anything. I was still figuring out how to be just Daniel instead of Daniel and Jennifer, and that process required more solitude than I'd expected. Summer arrived with the kind of heat that makes the entire South feel like a humid complaint. I spent weekends refinishing furniture I bought from estate sales, a hobby I'd stumbled into after finding a beaten-up dresser on the curb and deciding to see if I could fix it. Turned out I could. Sanding, staining, replacing hardware, it was meditative work that produced tangible results. You started with something broken and ended with something functional. The metaphor wasn't lost on me, but I appreciated it anyway. My father came over one Saturday and watched me work on a desk I'd picked up from a widow selling her late husband's workshop. You're good at this, he said, running his hand over the smooth wood. I shrugged. It's just patience and following steps. He settled into a lawn chair I'd set up on the small patio outside my apartment. Your mother worries you're lonely. I'm not lonely, I said, wiping sawdust off my arms. I'm alone. There's a difference. He thought about that while I measured hardware placement with more precision than necessary. She thinks you're punishing yourself. For what? I asked. Staying too long or leaving at all? Both, probably, he said. That's the thing about parents. They want you to be happy but also want to fix things, even when there's nothing left to fix. I appreciate the concern, I told him. But I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. He nodded and we sat in comfortable silence until the heat drove him back inside to the air conditioning. That evening, I finished the desk and stood back to admire it. What had been scratched and stained was now clean and solid, ready for someone else's life. I took a picture and posted it to a local buy and sell group, and by morning someone had claimed it. They picked it up that afternoon, a young couple moving into their first apartment, excited and grateful in that way people are when they're just starting out. I watched them load it carefully into their truck and felt something close to contentment. Not happiness exactly, but the quiet satisfaction of having made something better. Work continued to be the constant it had always been. Summer school meant teaching kids who'd failed history during the regular year, and while it could be frustrating, there was something rewarding about the ones who actually wanted to be there, who'd realized too late that understanding where we came from mattered. I taught the Revolutionary War again, the causes and effects, the decisions made by imperfect people trying to navigate impossible situations. One student asked why anyone would risk everything for independence when they could have just worked within the system. Because sometimes the system is the problem, I said. And working within it just means accepting what you know is wrong. He scribbled that down like it might be on the test. It wasn't, but I hoped he'd remember it anyway. In late July, I ran into Jennifer's mother at the grocery store. Barbara had always been kind to me, one of those women who bakes too much and remembers everyone's birthday. She looked older than I remembered, her hair grayer, her movements slower. "Daniel," she said, surprise and something like sadness crossing her face. We stood there in the produce section while other shoppers navigated around us, the refrigerated air making the moment feel suspended. "How are you?" I asked, because it seemed like the right thing to say. She sighed. "Managing." "And you?" "Good," I said. "Really good." She looked at me carefully, the way mothers do when they're trying to determine if you're lying to spare feelings. "I heard about the divorce." "I'm sorry it came to that." I nodded, unsure how much she knew or what Jennifer had told her. "These things happen," I said, keeping it vague. Barbara reached out and touched my arm briefly. "You were always good to her," she said. "I hope you know that." I didn't know how to respond, so I just thanked her and said I needed to get going. She squeezed my arm once more and let me leave. In the parking lot, sitting in my car with a bag of groceries getting warm in the passenger seat, I let myself feel the weight of that encounter. Barbara had been family once. Sunday dinners and Christmas mornings and all the small moments that accumulate into relationship. Now she was a stranger I'd run into at the store, someone I'd probably avoid if I saw her coming. Divorce didn't just end marriages. It ended entire networks of connection, leaving gaps where people used to be. August brought teacher workdays and the slow ramp up to a new school year. My classroom needed rearranging, bulletin boards needed updating, and I needed to remember how to stand in front of teenagers for 7 hours a day and make the past feel relevant. The department hired a new teacher, a woman named Claire who'd moved from somewhere up north and had that polite confusion of someone still learning that yes means yes ma'am here and tea is assumed to be sweet. She was younger than me by maybe 5 years, with dark hair she kept in a practical ponytail and a direct way of speaking that felt refreshing after years of coded conversations. We ended up in the teacher's lounge at the same time one afternoon, both of us assembling syllabi and complaining about the copier that had been broken since June. "You teach U.S. history too?" she asked, nodding at my stack of papers. "Guilty," I said. "What periods?" "All of them," she said with a grimace. "I'm the only history teacher at my level, so I get the full tour. Revolutionary War, Civil War, World Wars, Civil Rights. It's a lot." "It is," I agreed. "But it's also the best job." She raised an eyebrow. "Really? Teaching teenagers about dead people is the best job?" I laughed. "When you put it that way, it sounds grim. But yeah. Someone has to teach them that the present isn't inevitable. That people made choices that led here. And that they get to make choices that lead wherever we're going next." She considered that while the copier jammed again and I kicked it in the spot that usually unjammed it. "That's a better sales pitch than I got in grad school," she said. "You should lead professional development." "God, no," I said. Standing in front of teenagers is one thing. Standing in front of other teachers is terrifying. We ended up getting coffee after work that day, nothing intentional, just two people who happened to be walking to the same parking lot at the same time and decided why not. The conversation was easy in that way first conversations sometimes are, before history complicates things. She told me about moving south for a job that paid better than what she'd been doing. I told her about growing up here and never quite figuring out how to leave. She asked if I missed it, wherever I might have gone, and I admitted I didn't know because I'd never tried. That's honest, she said. Most people lie and say they stayed for family or roots or some noble reason. I did stay for family, I said. But I also stayed because leaving felt harder than staying. We sat in the coffee shop until they started stacking chairs, talking about teaching and the strange intimacy of spending your days with other people's children, trying to prepare them for a world you're not sure you understand yourself. When we finally left, she said we should do this again, and I agreed before I could think too hard about whether that was a good idea. At home, I realized I hadn't thought about Jennifer once during those 3 hours. It felt significant, like passing a milestone I hadn't known to watch for. The school year started with the usual chaos of schedules and locker assignments and kids trying to figure out if you were the kind of teacher who meant it when you said no phones. I was. My students learned quickly that I'd collect them without warning and return them at the end of class, and after the first week, most of them stopped testing me. Claire and I fell into a routine of eating lunch together when our schedules aligned, which was most days. Other teachers noticed and made the kind of gentle teasing comments people make when they think something might be starting. We ignored them. Or at least I did. I genuinely didn't know if this was friendship or the beginning of something else, and I wasn't in a hurry to define it. One afternoon in September, she asked about my summer and I told her about the furniture refinishing. She asked if I had pictures, and I showed her the before and after shots I'd saved on my phone. "These are really good," she said, scrolling through. "Do you sell them?" "Sometimes," I said. "Mostly I just like the process. Fixing things." She handed my phone back. "Is that a teacher thing or a you thing?" I'd never thought about it. Maybe both. We spend all day trying to fix gaps in knowledge. Makes sense it would carry over. She nodded. "I bake bread," she said. "Same principle. You start with ingredients that don't look like much, follow a process, and end up with something that didn't exist before. Plus, your house smells amazing." "Exactly," I said. Though my apartment smells like wood stain, which is less universally appealing. She laughed, and I realized I'd been making her laugh a lot lately. It felt good. Easy. Like something I didn't have to work at. Rachel noticed the shift before I did. "You're smiling more," she said one Sunday when I came over for dinner. "Am I?" I asked. She nodded, handing me plates to set the table. "You are. It's weird." I threw a napkin at her. "Thanks." "No, it's good weird," she clarified. "You were so serious for a while. Like you were still waiting for the other shoe to drop." "Maybe I was," I said. "Or maybe I'm just realizing there isn't another shoe. Just this. Whatever this is." She looked at me with that expression older sisters perfect over decades. "Is there someone?" I hesitated. "Maybe. I don't know yet." She grinned. "Good. You deserve maybe. Better than definitely not." We ate dinner with her family, and I helped the boys with homework that involved fractions and tears, and drove home feeling like my life had finally stopped being something I was recovering from and started being something I was actually living. October arrived with cooler air and the kind of light that makes everything look temporary. Halloween decorations appeared on lawns, pumpkins on porches, the whole performance of seasonal change. I bought candy for trick-or-treaters even though my apartment complex didn't get many, and ended up eating most of it myself while grading papers. Claire texted me a picture of her costume for the school's Halloween event, a historical figure I didn't recognize. "Who are you supposed to be?" I asked. "Emily du Châtelet," she replied. "French mathematician and physicist." Translated Newton into French and added her own commentary. Basically a genius everyone forgot about because she was a woman. I sent back a thumbs up and a comment about how my costume was just me in regular clothes, and she replied that I should at least wear a funny hat. I did not wear a funny hat, but I appreciated the suggestion. The next week, she invited me to a gallery opening downtown, a friend of hers who did paintings of ordinary objects rendered in extraordinary detail. I almost said no, falling back on the excuse that I didn't know anything about art. But then I thought about all the times I'd said no to things because they were outside my routine, and how that had slowly narrowed my life into something small and predictable. So I said yes. The gallery was the kind of space that felt too cool for me, exposed brick and track lighting and people in clothes that looked expensive but casual. Claire introduced me to her friend, a woman named Jasmine who had paint under her fingernails in an easy warmth that made you feel welcome even if you had no idea what you were looking at. "What do you think?" she asked after I'd stood in front of a painting of a hammer for probably too long. "It's honest," I said, which was the best I could come up with. She smiled. "That's my favorite compliment." Claire and I walked around looking at paintings of wrenches and measuring tape and other tools rendered with so much attention they felt important. I told her about the desk I'd refinished, how there was something satisfying about taking something discarded and making it valuable again. She listened in that focused way she had, where you knew she was actually hearing you and not just waiting for her turn to talk. "That's what teaching is too," she said. "Taking what people think they know and showing them there's more to it." We left the gallery and walked through downtown, past restaurants with outdoor seating and bars with live music spilling onto sidewalks. The night was cool enough to feel like fall but not cold enough to regret not bringing a jacket. We ended up at a diner that stayed open late, the kind of place with booths that had seen decades of conversations and pie that tasted better at midnight than it had any right to. She ordered coffee even though it was late. I ordered the same. We talked about teaching and students and the strange responsibility of being the adult in a room full of people who were almost adults but not quite. She told me about a kid who'd written an essay comparing the Civil War to a bad breakup, and how it was both terrible and kind of brilliant. I told her about a student who'd asked if George Washington had ever been on reality TV, and how I'd spent 10 minutes explaining why that was chronologically impossible before realizing he was messing with me. We laughed at the absurdity of it all, the impossibility of the job and the reasons we kept doing it anyway. When we finally left, she thanked me for coming and said she'd had fun. "Me too," I said, and meant it. On the drive home, I realized I hadn't checked my phone all evening. Hadn't thought about what I was supposed to be doing or whether I was doing this right. I just existed in a moment without measuring it against anything else. It felt revolutionary. November came in cold, the kind of cold that makes you believe winter is coming early even though it never really does here. Thanksgiving loomed on the calendar, and I felt the old anxiety creeping back. Last year had been fine, but that didn't mean this year would be. Rachel called mid-month to coordinate. "Mom wants to do the whole thing again," she said. "Turkey, sides, the works. Are you good with that?" "I'm good," I said. "Are you bringing anyone?" she asked, her voice carefully casual. "Should I?" "You could," she said. "If you wanted to." I thought about Claire. About whether inviting her to a family Thanksgiving was too much too soon. About whether I was overthinking something that could just be simple. "I'll think about it," I told Rachel. She made a noise that sounded like approval. "Good. Think about it. Then do it." I did think about it. For 3 days, I turned the idea over in my mind like a problem that needed solving. Finally, I asked Claire at lunch one day, trying to make it sound casual even though my heart was doing something complicated in my chest. "My family does Thanksgiving at my parents' house. Very traditional, very loud. You're probably busy, but if you're not, you'd be welcome." She looked up from her sandwich, surprised. "Really?" "I mean, yeah, I'd love to." I wasn't expecting to do anything, actually. My family's all up north and plane tickets were insane. I felt relief so profound it was almost embarrassing. "Great," I said. "It's chaos, fair warning. My nephews are 7 and have no volume control. My mom cooks too much. My dad tells the same stories every year. Sounds perfect, she said, and smiled in a way that made me believe her. I told Rachel that night. She made a sound like she was trying not to squeal. You invited her. I did, I said. Don't make a big deal out of it. Too late, she replied. Already making a huge deal. Texting Mom right now. I groaned. Please don't. But she already had. My mother called within minutes. Daniel, Rachel tells me you're bringing someone to Thanksgiving. It's not like that, I started, but she cut me off. I don't care what it's like, she said. I'm just happy you're bringing someone. What does she eat? Does she have any allergies? I gave her the information I had, which wasn't much, and promised to find out the rest. When I asked Claire the next day about dietary restrictions, she laughed. Is your mom panicking? A little, I admitted. She takes Thanksgiving very seriously. Claire smiled. Tell her I eat everything and I'm excited to meet everyone. I will not be the reason Thanksgiving is ruined. I texted that to my mother, who replied with 3 heart emojis and a message about how she couldn't wait to meet this mystery woman. I showed the text to Claire. Mystery woman, she read aloud. I like it. Sounds like I should wear a disguise. Please don't, I said. My family is weird enough without adding costumes. She promised to come as herself, which was all I wanted anyway. The week before Thanksgiving, school felt interminable. Kids were restless, thinking about the break in family drama and how many hours they could gain without parental supervision. I taught about the first Thanksgiving, the myth versus the reality, the way history gets simplified into something easier to celebrate. One student asked why we bother celebrating if the real story is so complicated. Because remembering is important, I said. Even the complicated parts. Especially the complicated parts. He didn't look convinced, but he wrote it down. After class, Claire caught me in the hallway. Nervous about Thursday, she asked. A little, I admitted. Are you? A little, she echoed. But good nervous. Like first day of school nervous, not something's about to go wrong nervous. That's a good distinction, I said. Let's hope it stays that way. Thanksgiving morning felt surreal. I picked Claire up from her apartment, a small place she'd decorated with plants and bookshelves and the kind of cozy intentionality that made you want to stay. She came out wearing jeans and a sweater that looked both casual and like she'd thought about it, which I appreciated. Ready, she asked, getting in the car. As I'll ever be, I said. The drive to my parents' house took 20 minutes, and we filled it with the kind of small talk that keeps nerves at bay. She asked about my family, and I gave her the rundown. Mom's intense but loving. Dad's quiet but has opinions. Rachel's my sister, you'll love her. The boys are named Ethan and Lucas and they're basically the same person in different shirts. She laughed. Got it. When we pulled up, Rachel's van was already there, music playing from inside the house. I could see my father through the window, arranging something on the counter. My mother opened the door before we'd even made it up the walkway. You must be Claire, she said, pulling her into a hug before Claire could respond. I'm so glad you could come. We have so much food. I hope you're hungry. Claire handled it gracefully. I'm starving, she said. And thank you for having me. My mother beamed and ushered us inside, where the smell of turkey and pie and a dozen other dishes created an atmosphere that felt like a memory before it had even happened. Rachel appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. You made it, she said, grinning at me before turning to Claire. I'm Rachel. Daniel's told me absolutely nothing about you, which means he likes you. Claire laughed. Good to know I passed the secrecy test. The boys thundered down the stairs, saw me, and immediately tackled my legs with the enthusiasm only 7-year-olds possess. Uncle Dan, Ethan yelled. We made a volcano. It exploded, Lucas added. On the carpet. Rachel groaned. They're still in trouble for that. Ignore them. I introduced Claire to the boys, who stared at her with unfiltered curiosity before asking if she liked Pokemon. She said she didn't know much about it but was willing to learn. They grabbed her hands and dragged her to the living room to show her their cards, and I watched her go with a mixture of amusement and gratitude. "She's good with them," Rachel said quietly. "Yeah," I said. "She is." My father came over and shook my hand, then nodded toward Claire. "She seems nice. Don't mess it up." "Glad to see you have confidence in me," I said. He clapped my shoulder. "You'll be fine. Just don't overthink it." Easier said than done, but I appreciated the advice. We gathered in the dining room, the table set with the same dishes and decorations as every year, and I felt that old sense of continuity. This was tradition. This was family. This was the thing that had survived everything, including the year we'd eaten early just to avoid a different version of this moment. My mother said grace, thanking God for family and health and second chances, and when she said that last part, she looked directly at me. Claire fit into the chaos as if she'd always been part of it. She complimented my mother's cooking, debated football with my father, and let the boys explain the intricate rules of a card game they'd invented and couldn't agree on. She asked questions and laughed at my dad's old stories and didn't seem fazed by the noise or the closeness or the way my family talked over each other with the kind of comfortable rudeness that only happens when people know they're loved. At one point, Rachel caught my eye across the table and mouthed, "I like her." I nodded, feeling something settle in my chest that had been restless for a long time. After dinner, we moved to the living room, everyone full and sleepy. The boys played on the floor. My parents sat in their usual chairs. Rachel and her husband took the couch. Claire and I ended up in the corner, sharing space on an ottoman that wasn't really meant for two people. "This is nice," she said quietly. "Your family is really nice." "They are," I agreed. "They've been through a lot, but they're solid." She looked at me. "You've been through a lot." I shrugged. "Everyone has. I just didn't handle it as well as I should have." "You handled it how you needed to," she said. "That's all anyone can do." I wanted to tell her how much that meant, how her presence here felt like proof that life could be something other than what I'd resigned myself to. But the words felt too big for the moment, so I just said thank you, and she squeezed my hand briefly before the boys demanded we play their made-up card game. We stayed until late, long past the time when dishes were washed and leftovers divided. When we finally said goodbye, my mother hugged Claire like she was already family, and my father told her to come back anytime. In the car, driving through streets lit by decorations and the glow of houses filled with their own versions of this, Claire said, "That was one of the best Thanksgivings I've ever had." "Mine too," I said. And I realized it was true. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Because I'd brought someone into my life and my family had welcomed her. Because I'd stopped hiding and started living. Because for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Winter came with purpose that year, cold enough to justify fires and wool blankets and the kind of evenings that invited staying in. Claire and I settled into something that felt less like dating and more like building, each week adding another layer to whatever we were creating together. We spent weekends grading papers at coffee shops, went to movies we'd argue about afterward, cooked meals that sometimes succeeded and sometimes ended with ordering pizza. It was ordinary in the best possible way, the kind of ordinary I thought I'd had with Jennifer but realized now I'd only been performing. By January, we'd stopped pretending we weren't together. She kept a toothbrush at my apartment. I had a drawer at hers. My family invited her to Sunday dinners without asking me first. Rachel declared her officially part of the family after Claire helped fold 3 loads of laundry and didn't complain once about the volume of tiny socks. "This is what it should feel like," Rachel told me one afternoon while Claire played a board game with the boys. "Easy. Like she fits." "She does," I agreed, watching Claire laugh at something Ethan said, her whole face lighting up in a way that made me realize I'd forgotten people could look like that. Happy without trying. Content without convincing themselves. In February, I ran into Jennifer at the mall. I was picking up a birthday gift for my father. She was coming out of a store with bags that suggested she was doing fine financially. We made eye contact before either of us could pretend we hadn't. The moment stretched awkward and inevitable. "Daniel," she said, her voice uncertain in a way I'd never heard before. She looked different. Thinner maybe, or just older. The confidence that had always defined her seemed diluted, like someone had added too much water to paint. "Jennifer," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. We stood there while shoppers flowed around us, two people who'd once shared everything now struggling to find words for anything. "How are you?" she asked. "Good," I said. "Really good." "And you?" She hesitated. "I'm okay. Working at a different firm. Smaller, but it's fine." She shifted her bags from one hand to the other. "I heard you're seeing someone." "News travels," I said. "I am." She nodded slowly, and I saw something cross her face that might have been regret or just recognition that time had moved forward without her permission. "I'm glad," she said, and I thought she might actually mean it. "You deserve that." "Thanks," I said, and found I had nothing else to offer. No bitterness, no satisfaction, just a quiet acknowledgement that we'd both moved on into separate lives that no longer intersected. She started to say something else, stopped, then just said take care. "You too," I replied, and we walked in opposite directions. I didn't look back. When I told Claire about it that evening, she asked how it felt. "Strange," I admitted. "Like running into someone you used to know but can't quite remember why you knew them." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "That's probably the healthiest response you could have. You're not angry anymore." "I'm not," I realized. I'd carried that anger for so long it had become part of my posture, something I'd grown accustomed to bearing. And now it was just gone, dissolved by time and distance and the simple act of building something better. By spring, Claire and I started talking about the future in concrete terms instead of hypotheticals. She mentioned a lease ending. I mentioned space in my apartment or the possibility of finding something bigger. We talked about it the way people talk about real things, with measurements and timelines and the understanding that this was no longer maybe, it was moving toward definitely. Rachel threw a barbecue in April, one of those perfect evenings where the temperature cooperates and the bugs haven't quite arrived yet. My parents came, Claire's friend Jasmine drove down with her partner, and my father grilled burgers with the focus of a man who took meat temperature seriously. The boys ran circuits around the yard, their laughter providing soundtrack to conversations that overlapped and diverged and came back together. I stood by the grill watching Claire talk to my mother about something that made them both laugh, and my father nudged me with his elbow. "You're going to marry that one," he said, "not a question." "Eventually," I said, surprised by how easily I admitted it. "Good," he replied, flipping a burger with unnecessary precision. "Don't wait too long. People think they have more time than they do." I thought about that while smoke rose and kids played and the people I loved gathered in one place. About time and how we spend it and the difference between waiting for the right moment and creating it. About how my marriage to Jennifer had ended and how that ending had made space for this beginning. About how sometimes the worst thing that happens is also the door to the best thing that could. In June, Claire and I moved into a small house with a yard that needed work and a kitchen that had enough space for two people who liked cooking together. We painted walls on weekends, assembled furniture that came with instructions neither of us followed correctly, and slowly turned empty rooms into a home that belonged to both of us. Rachel brought the boys over to help, which meant they mostly ran around while we worked, but their presence made the house feel lived in before we'd even finished unpacking. My parents donated furniture from their attic, things they'd been meaning to get rid of for years. Jasmine painted us a small canvas of 2 coffee cups sitting side by side, simple and perfect. We hung it in the kitchen where we'd see it every morning. "This is it," Claire said one evening, standing in our living room surrounded by boxes we hadn't gotten to yet. "This is home." "Yeah," I agreed. "It is." Summer brought lazy routines. Morning coffee on the small back porch. Evenings planning lessons side by side at our dining table. weekends experimenting with recipes that sometimes worked and sometimes didn't. We went to baseball games and concerts and farmers markets, collecting experiences the way some people collect objects. We argued about whether to get a dog and compromised by fostering one for a local rescue, a three-legged mutt named Roger who somehow decided our house was exactly where he belonged. We failed as foster parents by adopting him a week later, both of us unwilling to let him go to someone else. He fit into our life like he'd always been part of it, sleeping between us at night and greeting us at the door like we'd been gone for years instead of hours. In August, a year after we'd started teaching together, Claire and I sat in our backyard while Roger chased fireflies he'd never catch. We'd been talking about nothing important when she said, "I need to tell you something." My chest tightened reflexively, old patterns of anxiety flaring. "Okay," I said carefully. She took my hand. "I love you. I know I haven't said it yet, and you haven't either, and maybe we've both been waiting for the right moment. But I don't think there's a right moment. There's just this. Us. Here. And I love you." The words settled over me like something I'd been waiting to hear without knowing I was waiting. "I love you too," I said, and felt the truth of it in every part of me. I have for a while. I was just scared to say it. "Why?" she asked. "Because the last time I said it to someone, it stopped meaning anything," I admitted. "And I didn't want that to happen again." She squeezed my hand. "It won't. Because we're not them. We're us. And us is different." She was right. We were different. This was different. Everything about this was built on honesty instead of assumption, on presence instead of convenience, on choosing each other every day instead of just existing in parallel. We sat there until the fireflies disappeared and Roger gave up chasing magic, and I thought about how far I'd traveled from that night I'd read a text message that shattered everything I thought I knew. How that ending had been the beginning of this. How sometimes you have to lose yourself completely to find out who you actually are. Thanksgiving approached again, the third one since everything changed. My mother called to plan the menu, my father made his usual noises about football schedules, and Rachel coordinated who was bringing what. Claire and I were assigned dessert, which we took seriously enough to test 3 different pie recipes before settling on one that didn't collapse. The morning arrived clear and cold, the kind of weather that made you grateful for warm houses and people who filled them. We drove to my parents' place with pies carefully balanced and Roger in the back seat wearing a bandana Rachel had insisted we put on him. When we walked in, the house smelled like it always did this time of year, like butter and herbs and tradition. My mother hugged us both, my father took the pies with approval, and the boys immediately claimed Roger for an adventure that involved a lot of running. We gathered around the same table, added extra chairs for Claire and Roger's presence underfoot, and my father said grace. He thanked God for family, for health, for the year that had passed and the people who'd made it through to this moment. When he finished, we all said amen and meant it. The meal unfolded with comfortable chaos. Food was passed, wine was poured, stories were told that we'd all heard before but laughed at anyway because that's what family does. Claire fit into it all as naturally as breathing, and I watched my mother beam at her across the table like she'd personally arranged this outcome. Afterward, while we cleaned up, Rachel pulled me aside. "You look happy," she said. "I am," I told her. "Really happy." "Good," she said. "You earned it. The hard way, maybe, but you earned it." That evening, driving home with Claire beside me and Roger asleep in the back, I thought about all the Thanksgivings that had led to this one. The one where we'd left early. The first one after the divorce where I'd been grateful just to get through it. And now this one, where I wasn't just getting through but actually living. Where I'd brought someone home who fit into my family like she'd always belonged there. Where I'd stopped carrying weight I didn't need and started building something worth carrying instead. Claire reached over and took my hand. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "How grateful I am," I said. "For all of it. Even the hard parts. Especially the hard parts, because they led here." She smiled. "That's very Thanksgiving of you." I laughed. "I'm feeling seasonal." When we got home, we let Roger out into the yard and stood on the porch watching him investigate every corner like he did every night, making sure his territory was secure. The air was cold enough to see our breath, and Claire leaned against me with the kind of easy comfort that comes from knowing someone completely. "This is it," I said quietly. "This is what I want. Every day." She looked up at me. "Are you asking me something?" "Maybe," I said. "Eventually. When the moment's right." She smiled. "The moment's always right when it's us." I kissed her then, there on our porch with our dog in our yard and our life stretching out ahead of us full of possibilities I couldn't predict but knew I wanted. And I thought about that text message from years ago, the one that had arrived late at night and broken everything. How I thought it was an ending when really it was a clearing, making space for this beginning. For Claire and Roger and Sunday dinners and ordinary evenings that felt extraordinary because they were mine. Because I'd stopped waiting for my life to be something and started living it instead. Because I'd learned that sometimes the best thing you can do is let go of what's breaking you and trust that something better is already on its way. The next morning, I woke up in our house next to someone who loved me, made coffee in our kitchen while Roger waited patiently for breakfast, and felt a contentment so complete it didn't need explaining. This was it. Not the ending of something, but the middle of everything. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.